Hello everybody and welcome to Ealing Broadway. Now today I have cheated and driven up to London because the coach wouldn't have gotten me here in time and the train was just stupidly expensive. Anyway, that's besides the point. Today I'm going to be taking my first ride on a vintage 1938 tube train. Now these used to operate all over the London Underground network, and this particular example that I'm travelling on today used to operate on the Northern Line, and back when it operated it had a few more branches. Well, when I say few, it had one more branch which is now part of the Great Northern Network on National Rail. Anyway, the train would start its journey on the Piccadilly line at Northfield Station, which would mean I'd have to take the District line 2 stops to Acton Town and change there. So here I am making my way to Acton Town via Ealing Common.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
This is Ealing Common, eastbound. Trains are not stopping at Barons Court due to station improvement works. The rear two doors will This is a District line train to Upminster. The next station is Acton Town.
Here I am passing Ealing Common Depot. Here I am arriving into the absolutely lovely Acton Town Station, where I would have to change trains onto the Piccadilly line to head 2 stops to Northfields. On my way I'd pass through South Ealing, and the time that the train takes to get between South Ealing and Northfields I believe is the shortest on the entire London Underground network. Anyway, there goes my S-Stock District line train heading towards Upminster via central London. Here is the abandoned platform where I believe District line trains used to run to South Acton on the Overground. Here is a 1973 stop Piccadilly line train arriving into Acton Town, heading towards central London, and then onwards to Arnos Grove and Cockfosters. This particular 1973 stop train is looking a bit worse for wear on the outside. I know that in recent years, especially since COVID, the Underground has had a massive graffiti problem. Here is another Piccadilly line train arriving, however this would not be mine. This is one heading on the other branch back towards Rayners Lane. Here is my Piccadilly line train arriving into Acton Town to take me to Northfields with one stop in between at South Ealing. Here I am leaving Acton Town, heading towards Northfields. Now this doesn't just go for Acton Town or Northfields, and this doesn't just go for the Art Deco stations, which as much as I do like, are starting to look very tired and run down, especially since COVID. Again, just like most of the trains, we've had a massive graffiti problem, and just overall there's been a lack of works, and a lot of the stations that I visited just needed a lick of paint. They didn't even need any new improvement works or building works taking place. So maybe London Underground should go and buy some more paint, especially at Northfields. I'll show you when I get there, but one of the round doors is looking extremely faded. Here I am arriving into Northfields about an hour before the 1938 stock will depart at. The 1938 stock Heritage Tube train will depart from the adjacent Platform 1. There goes that 1973 stock Piccadilly line train heading towards Hounslow Central and onwards to Heathrow's Terminals 2 and 3 and Terminal 5. Now, despite the dire need of some paint work, I did think the frontage to Acton Town Station still looks pretty good in all of this Art Deco glory. But something that doesn't look good is the Northfields Model Shop. I thought I'd just pay a visit to it. However, it turns out it closed a few weeks, maybe even months ago, which was a shame, but the prices were quite expensive and, well, it's just quite hidden and out the way. And there was stuff everywhere. You could barely move 3 feet inside the shop. Anyway, here I am back at Northfield Station, waiting for the 1938 stock to arrive. Here is the 1938 stock tube train arriving into Platform 1 at Northfields. Now, I'm not too sure if this particular train ever wore the livery, but some of the 1938 stock trains, as well as some of the 1972 stock trains currently in use on the Bakerloo line, wore a grey version of this lovely red London Transport livery. Now, after some confusion with some regular passengers heading to the airport, it was finally time to depart Northfields bang on time at 10:05. Although we wouldn't stop anywhere, we would pass through all of the stations between here and Hatton Cross, after which we would take the loop around Heathrow via Terminal 4 and Heathrow Central, which is Terminals 2 and 3. We wouldn't serve Terminal 5 as that is on a newer branch of the Piccadilly line. Here I am passing through the lovely Boston Manor Station, which has a lovely signal box at the end of the eastbound/northbound platform.
It was last overhauled in 1990 properly for heritage, but basically it's looked after by volunteers. So everything is all clean and polished. This is also impregnated with fireproof resin. Sorry? They dig you, where's car, put in the trailer cars,
Here I'm passing through Hounslow Central, which is very close to the mainline Hounslow station, located on the South Western Railway loop, which heads around towards Brentford. Now, although Hounslow Central Station doesn't particularly interest me, some of the stations on the new extension beyond here to the airport do interest me. I'm not sure if I got some videos of it, but stations such as Hatton Cross and Hounslow West do interest me. In particular, the tickets hall at Hounslow West looks like somebody's hat.
And I think they did wait for him to get up and get off before they went on.
92, so he didn't do it.
Yeah, it wasn't 92 days. It's 92 days.
Here I am passing through Hatton Cross, which is where the free Heathrow zone starts. We can travel between Hatton Cross and all three of the Heathrow stations for free. This is very useful, especially if you're transferring between terminals. Here I am arriving into Heathrow Terminal 4. The train did stop here, but the doors didn't open. But the train did cause some more confusion for passengers visiting London and waiting for the regular Piccadilly line. Not long after we stopped at Terminal 4, we departed again and headed towards Heathrow Central. Here I am passing through Heathrow Central. On a regular Piccadilly line train, you'd be able to change here for the Elizabeth line and National Rail services, as well as local buses. Notice how the roundels here say Heathrow Terminals 1, 2 and 3 instead of just 2 and 3. I believe Terminal 1 at the moment is not in use. Here I am passing through Hatton Cross once again. I quite like some of the small artwork here on the station pillars in the middle of the platform, and I believe this is one of a small number of stations to have glow-up roundels. After passing through Boston Manor Station, we passed the nearby Piccadilly line depot with the same name before arriving into Northfields.
You have to get a specific, like, say, cinema card, money to get. So it's so complicated.
Here I am arriving back into Northfields. The train arrived in about 20 minutes ahead of schedule at 10:42, so there would be a small opportunity to get some photos of this lovely tube train.
We are a little bit early, so we might get a chance to take some
Here is a regular Piccadilly line train arriving, heading towards central London and then onwards through to Cockfosters. Now I do wonder if this train came out of the Boston Manor depot, as there are very few to no passengers on this train, and there are quite a few passengers waiting when we pass through the Heathrow stations. Here is the 1973 stock leaving alongside the Heritage 1938 stock. I personally prefer the 1938 stock. I think it looks quite cool, and you can actually open the windows, which means it's a lot cooler in the summer compared to the air conditioning you get on more modern trains. And I'm not even too sure if the Piccadilly line trains have air conditioning. As well as that, you can hear the motors a bit better on the 1938 stock. Although it was interesting to hear that originally they didn't go as fast as the regular trains you get nowadays on the Piccadilly line and other tube lines as well. Here is the 1938 stock leaving Northfields to head over to the nearby depot by Acton Town Station, where it will stay for a few minutes before forming the next run, I believe at 11:40. Here is my train arriving into Northfields to take me back into central London, where I'll be alighting at Piccadilly Circus. As much as I think Northfields Station does look a little bit tired now, I still quite like the Art Deco design of this station. Here I am passing the 1938 stock again between Acton Town and Chiswick Park. Here I am arriving into Hammersmith. That is the Piccadilly and District Line station, not the Hammersmith and City and Circle Line station, which is much older and was built by the Great Western. Although I didn't get the coach from Bridgewater, as it would get me in at 10:30 at Hammersmith and the train left Northfields at 10:05, I would have liked to have gotten the coach up here anyway, and at some point in the not too distant future I will try and do the coach once again, as I do quite like the Bury Superfast service, which brings you right here to Hammersmith in as little as 3 hours, that is if there's no traffic on the M4, and as well as that, maybe next time I'll try and get the premium seats right at the front on the top deck of the coach. After Barons Court, we head underground and serve Earls Court, Gloucester Road and South Kensington. I always find it quite strange that the Piccadilly line has its own separate stations at Earls Court, Gloucester Road and South Kensington, whereas beyond Earls Court, heading towards Hammersmith and Acton Town, the Piccadilly line runs alongside and serves the same stations as the District line instead of having its own separate platform down underneath. I sometimes wonder if it's because of the congestion you get at Earls Court and if it's because of the Circle line joining the District line at Gloucester Road and South Kensington. Here I am arriving into Piccadilly Circus, where I would go above ground and have a look in the centre of London just for a little bit before heading back underground on the Bakerloo line. Now, one thing I do quite like about Piccadilly Circus is there are many shortcuts between the Piccadilly line and the Bakerloo line. Now, I do believe the shortcut is signposted, but only towards the Bakerloo line and not the other way around towards the Piccadilly line. And in a very old Londonist video, which is secret to the Piccadilly line, they do show that you can miss a whole train or more if you follow the signpost to the Piccadilly line instead of taking the shortcut. One thing that was also great to see is that the announcements warning you about pickpockets were no longer playing here at Piccadilly Circus. Here is the lovely ticket hall here at Piccadilly Circus, which Charles Holden designed along with many other great underground stations. Now, I'm not too sure if he designed the ticket hall at Oxford Circus, but I would imagine so, as they're both very similar. Now, I do believe that Piccadilly Circus was a station before Charles Holden redesigned it, but the redesigned station opened in 1928. Whilst walking along Regent Street heading towards Oxford Circus Station, I took a quick look into Hamleys. I do quite like the lifts in here, and whilst I'm not too interested in lifts anymore, it does have the classic old Otis voice. Whether or not Otis still use that voice to this day, who knows? I don't think they do. As well as that, it's always quite interesting to go into Hamleys and see how stupidly overpriced all of the Hornby stuff is. Considering that they don't even sell any other things now, it's all just Hornby in terms of model railway things, I do find the prices a little bit ridiculous.
Den var den största tillsammans med
Although Hornby do have some complete junk on sale here at Hamleys, they also have some pretty good models, including the GWR Class 800. That is the new one, and I'm pretty sure it's the Railroad, or is it the Railways version, whichever one is the cheaper brand that Hornby do. At some stage, after I achieve my goal of getting a cross-country model train, I will try and get another GWR Class 800, as I already have one, and I think it'd be quite cool to have two. If you know where to get a cross-country train from, please let me know, as I've been looking for ages, and well, if I spot them, they're either really expensive or not available at all. And in some cases, it's both of them. They're really, really expensive, and then they just disappear. I don't even have the opportunity to have a look at them. Anyway, after having a look at Hamleys and having a look at some incredibly cool Hornby trains there, they did have some good stuff on offer, including an old South West Trains PEP, I think they're called, as well as a Greater Anglia Flirt. I head back down into the depths of the underground to take a ride on my second favourite tube line, the Bakerloo line. Suckers. As I head on to the southbound platform for the Bakerloo line here at Oxford Circus, a 1972 stock train rolls in on camera. Absolutely great timing. I absolutely love the 1972 stock trains, and whilst a lot of the trains are still covered in graffiti, it is quite nice that they've been cleaned up just a little bit and have had new lights fitted, which means they don't now flicker every time you go over a bad bit of track. Anyway, I'm going to be taking this past Piccadilly Circus all the way to the end of the line at Elephant and Castle. These trains are now stupidly old and are starting to feel a bit tired, even if they have been cleaned up just a little bit. Unfortunately, the Piccadilly line has taken priority, as that line goes to Heathrow Airport, whereas the Bakerloo line does not. Hopefully some new trains will be introduced at some point, because as much as I love the 1972 stock, it is getting incredibly old now. Here is the train arriving into Embankment. Along with Charing Cross, these stations have had lots of name changes, and at one point Embankment was called Charing Cross and Charing Cross was called Strand, and both stations have had Strand in their name. Besides from that, I quite like the artwork on the station platforms at Embankment.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Change here to the Jubilee, Northern and Waterloo and City lines and National Rail services. This is a Bakerloo line train to Elephant and Castle. Please stand clear of the doors. Signal with more. Exit here for the Imperial. Please stand clear of the doors.
Here I am departing Lambeth North, which has a lovely classic Leslie Green design. Here I am arriving into Elephant and Castle, where you can change for National Rail trains, mainly Thameslink, as well as the Northern Line's Bank branch, which I will be taking past Bank to Moorgate. But first, let's see this 1972 stock train depart Elephant and Castle back towards Queen's Park. For some reason, the next 3 trains were not going beyond Queen's Park, with one of them only going to Stonebridge Park. I wonder why none of them are going to Harrow and Wealdstone. I would guess engineering works. Now, just to give you an idea of how frequent the London Underground can be, the Bakerloo line isn't even the most frequent line on the Underground network. Pretty much 30 seconds after the train heading towards Queen Park that I was just on left Elephant and Castle, another train bound for Stonebridge Park arrived in, and once again had about a 2-minute turnaround before it headed back up the line. I hadn't even made it to the end of the platform, where I had to walk to the Northern Line before the train pulled in. This exact thing also happened on the Northern Line when I got to Moorgate. Here is my 1995 stock Northern Line train arriving into Elephant and Castle to take me a few stops up the line to Moorgate via London Bridge and Bank. Now, along with the Jubilee and Central lines, the Northern Line is notorious for being absolutely rammed even when it's not rush hour, and today is no example. This was about midday, maybe 1 o'clock on a Saturday, and well, the train was absolutely rammed, albeit a train did come about 30 seconds after, which is a lot quieter, so maybe this one was running a minute or 2 off schedule. Anyway, I decided to board it anyway and head a few stops to Moorgate. I don't particularly like the Northern Line trains, and in a few moments' time you will hear why. They're some of the newest on the London Underground network, and yet they completely deafen you to bits.
Metropolitan lines, the Elizabeth line, and National Rail Services.
Here I am arriving into Moorgate, where I would change onto the Elizabeth line at Liverpool Street. Now I know what you're thinking, and most of you probably already know this, but Fred, the Elizabeth line goes from Liverpool Street, not Moorgate. Yeah, but because the Elizabeth line station at Liverpool Street, and this goes for a few other stations on the Elizabeth line as well, because the station is so big, there is actually a connecting corridor that links up to Moorgate station as it's so close, which I think is absolutely amazing. And if you are brave enough, and if you could be bothered, to be honest with you, because it's probably a really long walk, you could walk between Moorgate and Liverpool Street stations via the Elizabeth line platform rather than taking the subsurface lines.
Metropolitan line is also closed. New service between Harrow on the Hill, Amersham, Chesham, and Watford due to planned engineering work. The Waterloo and City line is also planned engineering. London is also closed. New service between Houston and Gilbert Island due to planned engineering work. Good service on the rest of the line. Good service on other London Underground lines.
One thing I do like about the Elizabeth line, bearing in mind that I don't think I've ever been on it at rush hour, is that the corridors at the stations are always quite quiet. Sure, they get busier than this, but not by much, albeit the trains are a completely different story. No matter what time of the day you're on the Elizabeth line, the train will always be completely rammed. Here is my train arriving into Liverpool Street to take me a few stops across central London to the other side at Paddington. The Elizabeth line, just like the London Overground network, uses mainline trains. It uses class 345 trains, which are incredibly nice inside, although you don't always get the time or the space to admire it, as it's always so crowded, and because the Elizabeth line is incredibly quick, which is one of the reasons why I and many other people like it. It can whisk you across central London in a matter of minutes.
The next station is Farringdon. Change for Circle Line, Hammersmith and City Line, Metropolitan Line, and National Rail Services. Change for Central Line and Northern Line. Lifts to exit this station. If you
Here I am
travelling
arriving
with
into
luggage.
Paddington Elizabeth line station. From here I'd have to make my way across the mainline station concourse to the underground station here at Paddington, the underground station for the Circle and Hammersmith and City lines. Although that station is newer, I'm guessing it had a rebuild in recent years along with a few other stations on the underground network. That station originally opened first by the Metropolitan Railway, with Parade Street station opening a few years later by, I think it's the Metropolitan District Railway, but I could be wrong. Anyway, there goes that Elizabeth line train heading out towards Reading. That could take me directly back to Ealing Broadway, but what's the point of that? Let's have some fun and stop off at Westfield Shopping Centre along the way. Here I am exiting the Elizabeth line station here at Paddington. I quite like the Elizabeth line just because it has lots of little quirks and artwork that people may miss. For example, the Elizabeth line station here at Paddington reminds me of cookies. It kind of has a kind of browny ginger roof, and as well as that, there are painted clouds on top of the roof at Paddington Elizabeth Line station as you exit the station and head onto the main line concourse. They're not real clouds, they're just ones painted onto the roof, or I don't know, maybe they're not painted, who knows. Anyway, here I am at the Circle and Hammersmith and City Line station here at Paddington to head a few stops down the line to Wood Lane. Here I am leaving Paddington, heading towards Wood Lane. After that, the train will continue on to Shepherd's Bush Market and Hammersmith.
The next station is Royal Oak.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Here I am arriving into Westbourne Park. Here you can see a number of entrances as we arrive, which are locked up. These are only open on incredibly busy days, for example, when the Notting Hill Carnival takes place. On days when there are no special events, you have to use the normal entrance, just like everybody else.
Between the train and the platform.
After passing through Ladbroke Grove, which was the name given to a horrible crash on the Great Western Main Line, and Latimer Road, we finally arrived into the modern-day Wood Lane station. However, in this era, there have been many reincarnations of this station, including ones that have also been confusingly called White City.
The next station is Wood Lane. Change for the Central Line. From White City, exit for Westfield, London.
Here is this Circle Line S-Dock train leaving Wood Lane, heading towards Hammersmith, with the only station in between, unless I've forgotten one, is Shepherd's Bush Market. One thing I do like about the modern day Wood Lane station is that it has this old underground logo from the original Wood Lane station, or one of the original Wood Lane station, I'm not too sure which one. Anyway, here I am heading towards the Westfield Shopping Centre, the original one which opened in 2008. It still seems pretty brand new to me. A newer Westfield Shopping Centre was opened on the other side of the Central Line at Stratford in 2011, just ahead of the Olympics coming to London in 2012. I do like both of the Westfield Shopping Centres, but I think the one at White City just beats it for me. After getting a slightly late lunch, this was about 2 o'clock, so maybe it's more than slightly late, I head down to the Central Line at Shepherd's Bush Station to catch my final train, and perhaps I've saved the best one till last to head out to Ealing Broadway. Although I'd be boarding the Central Line at Shepherd's Bush Underground Station, there's also a Overground and National Rail station just across the way, which is equally as new as the current Shepherd's Bush station. Here is my last train arriving as a Shepherd's Bush to take me all the way to Ealing Broadway. Now I do really like the Central Line, and that includes the 1992 stop trains that operate along the route. I think these trains look absolutely amazing, sound absolutely amazing, at least for the time being, and I even like the announcements on board the trains, even if you can't hear them clearly that often. However, they are in the very slow process of refurbishing all of the 1992 stock train, which in my opinion will completely ruin them. There are some much needed features that are going to be added, such as wheelchair spaces and actual destination boards and better announcements so you can actually hear them clearly, whereas at the moment I do quite like them, but quite often you can't hear the announcements. In my opinion, they're going to completely ruin the trains for one reason. They're replacing the awesome sounding motors with newer motors that will sound exactly the same as the Circle Line train, which in my opinion, it just won't fit with these trains. I think these trains sound awesome and perhaps it will ruin them, but they are in need of cleans. They've had a bit of a problem with graffiti at the moment, and that includes the Central Line. Here I am arriving into one of my favourite stations, maybe my second favourite station, White City. I absolutely love the look of this station, but I don't think it was designed by Charles Holden. I could be wrong, and it is sort of in his style, but for some reason I just don't feel like it was. The station mimics Loughton Station at the other end of the Central Line, which I have yet to visit. Actually, that's a lie, I did visit it quite a few years ago, but that was really before I started filming, when I went to visit the Effingham-Oldham Railway. I have not yet visited the eastern part of the Central Line in recent times, so if you think I should, and I should film you and take me along with me, just let me know. And next time I go to London, maybe I'll head out east instead of west. Here I am arriving into one of my other favourite stations, although it's not as high as White City or Bond Street, which is my favourite. This is North Acton. This is my local station when I often stay over in London. Well, I say often, I haven't stayed over for quite some time now, but I used to stay here quite a lot. Now, in more recent times when I have stayed over, and even that was over a year ago, I have stayed at other locations just because the local hotel here is a Holiday Inn Express. It's very nice, you get free breakfast, but it is ridiculously expensive for one night, so this is why I don't come to London very often. This is why I went to York. Whether or not you've seen that video yet, probably not. But I went to York because the train price was about the same, but the hotel was way cheaper up in York. And yeah, it's really far away, I've never been there before. So yeah, look out for that video because I don't think it's come out yet. If it has, well, I do apologise, but I don't think it has. Anyway, the section of the line between Ealing Broadway and the centre of London, I have many childhood memories of, because like I said, I used to stay over at North Acton a lot, and it's quite a bit of a shame that I don't, but there are other places such as York and Birmingham, I don't think you've seen that video yet either, that are just completely awesome as well. As we parallel the Great Western Main Line in front of us and the London Underground District Line behind us, that can only mean one thing. Yes, we are finally coming in to the final station on my journey around London, which is Ealing Broadway, exactly where I started. Thank you very much for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and I was just going to solely base it on the 1938 stop, and the title will probably be Fred Rides the 1938 stop. But I just thought it'd be interesting to film my journey around London and have a bit more content of the London Underground, considering I don't come here very often at all anymore, mainly because of how blimmin' expensive it is. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. There should be some interesting stuff coming up, there's a load of events which will come out, and after that, my Birmingham and York videos will hopefully be on the way. There's a little spoiler alert for you there for the next couple of weeks, maybe even months. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone!